The, um, the police department is not the only one of the things we're also working on in your ward and throughout the city is the census. And we have the CUPS, the United States Census 2010. And I know they're coming out in a few weeks and they're going to mail them. We've had census representatives in your ward as well to discuss the process of jobs, why it's important for everyone to participate. An accurate census count means so much, and maybe you can share with us how the first ward can benefit by an active census.
Well, our ward, we have a lot of funding that comes in for various programs, whether it's through the Presbyterian Center, Brand New Day that we just talked about earlier, a lot of recreational programs, different basketball tournaments that we run. We have our Eport Little League. There's a lot of housing programs that we run, and so the way I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but if the population is set at a certain number, then the federal government will use that number as the counting basis to where the money goes. And so in my ward especially, it's an issue because there's a lot of folks who either don't speak English very well or refuse to give any information to a government entity because of fear of retribution. And so it's very important that people lose that fear and fill out the forms because we have, in my neighborhood, somewhere around 24,000 people. And if half of them decide they're not going to fill out the census, well, it's only going to look like we have 12,000 people. And so the monies that would come for infrastructure improvement from the federal government or any other programs would get diminished by that amount.
Yeah, that's a really good way of summing it up because clearly if more people get counted, the more access we have to community development block grant money and sewer infrastructure money and things of that nature. And whether they are legal or illegal, they need to get counted.
Correct.
And we go throughout the city, as you do, in talking about how important it is to be counted in the 2010 census.
Right. We have, for example, in our neighborhood, 4 or 5 different schools, and we just had one built down on Front Street. And some of the money from there came from the state of New Jersey, but might have trickled down from the feds. So all of this is important.
How are they working out? Because you have 2 new schools?
We have 2 new schools.
One on Trumbull Street.
Correct.
And one on 2nd. First.
Phenomenal.
First, yeah. They working out well?
Very well. I get a lot of praise from the residents who go to those schools. I just wish there would be a little more concentrate on community schools. People from the neighborhood actually go, all the people from the neighborhood would have an opportunity to utilize. We had a lot of busing going on.
Yeah, it's a big complaint throughout the city. I would much rather see a lot of these schools deal with the neighborhood kids and then busing the kids from other areas to the neighborhood. But the neighborhood should clearly have the first shot at these new schools.
That's my opinion.
Unfortunately, that's not the way the school board does things. But you're right. They should have the first shot at it as the neighborhood, especially when the new schools were built. In some of the not so affluent areas, they should have the right at the new schools. That was the purpose of it.
I mean, if you want to do a lottery where you give other students throughout the district an opportunity, then keep that to like 10 or 20%. Right. But the first 75, 80% should be concentrated on the people from the neighborhood.
Best part of being councilman, what do you think?
Well, I think the best part of being councilman is being able to serve people. Being an attorney, I always tend to tell people it's a similar job. If somebody comes in with a concern, you deal with them, whether it's if it's a legal concern, and as a councilman, it's usually a city-related concern. And our job, we may not get the same rate of pay, but it's the same concept. You're there to service the person who elected you into office, and in my neighborhood, I don't think there's anybody that's going to complain about the fact that any time there's a phone call made to my house, my cell phone, or my office, there's always a return phone call.
Well, that's probably the interesting thing. I mean, as council elections approach, and one of the things you'll have to deal with is to make sure that you're accessible. And one of the things I've always prided myself on, and when I was on the city council, was accessibility. Right. And if the people know how to reach you, they're going to think well of your attempts to make things better.
Right. See, you're also going to have constituents, residents, that would rather complain to the guy next door than to call the councilman on city-related issues. So my message to the public is, whenever you have a concern or a complaint, make sure that complaint gets to the right person as opposed to just spitting it up into the air somewhere.
Now, snow removal, one of the things we didn't touch on, we were able to so far do pretty good. But snow removal in your ward is because it's the oldest part of the city, the streets are the most narrow part, and with the proliferation of cars, most neighbors kind of cooperate, or some like throw it back in the street. How do you deal with that issue, Councilman? That's always a tough one.
It is a tough one. You see, in Eport, it's like you said, the oldest section, so we have the most narrow streets, and they're all two-way. Previous director Lapola and I always had many conversations about making the Eport community a one-way area, except for Frog Hollow. Frog Hollow does have the one-ways, but in most streets they're narrow, they're two-way. So our plows tend to clean the center area of the street, and then the sides get a little, left undone sometimes because people tend to shovel the snow into the street all the time. And all I can do is whenever I see it, I always tell them, listen, do me a favor, put it back on the sidewalk. It's a lot easier.
Because you can't win. You can't win because they want to get their car out, and it's quite interesting. Well, I know we're taping this show on Monday, and we're expecting another snowfall on Wednesday. Yeah. So hopefully it'll go well that week. And
I hope so.
Councilman, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on the show this evening, and wish you well in your attempts to make sure the First Ward does well economically and survives in these very difficult times as you are doing now.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.
On behalf of Councilman Grover and myself, we would like to wish all of you a very happy Valentine's Day and look forward to seeing you next week on another edition of Our City.